righty, that should get us in the mood here this afternoon, this morning, this evening, whenever you are watching this broadcast. This is Kathy Palmer coming to you from Westfield Community Programming, WCPC, Channel 15, westfieldtv.org, in cooperation with Westfield State University, 89.5 FM. And we have several new guests here, some that have come back that are to finish up what we started last week. And then we have Cindy Gaylord as my co-chair again. And behind the glass over there is Peter Coles, our producer. Good afternoon, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
And you were
yes.
You were not feeling well last week, Peter. I'm sorry to hear that.
Still recovering.
Oh.
Still recovering.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going around right now.
Yeah, it started cold, then it went to sinus infection, and now it's back to cold.
Oof.
Well, I do hope you're getting better. Please, we need you. We can't do this without you. I can't even plug in the microphones and the earphones without Peter. I'm learning. I'll get it done. So before we begin, we do have to pay some homage to today because we'll get to yours for next, but we need to get to St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's, the patron saint of Ireland. However, he did not charm the snakes out of Ireland. Maybe he did. Maybe he drove them out in a Subaru. I have no idea what he did.
It's evacuation.
But
That's the more important thing. Sorry.
But with St. Patrick, we know that he brought in a lot of Irish customs to the United States. In about the middle of the 1840s, 1850s, we did have an influx of Irish citizens coming to the city of Westfield. They came in to work mostly on the canal that came through, the Hampshire-Hamden Canal, Farmington Canal, different name, whatever. Same one that came up from New London and went up through Northampton, hopefully to ship goods down to the ocean. Unfortunately, everyone who invested in the canal never made their money back, but oh well, that's the way business goes. As soon as the canal was erected, we also had issues with it. Beavers were making holes in it, farmers were cutting it up, it froze in the winter. It didn't work well. But the Irish did a lot digging it. Then when the canal was finished, they were bringing the railroad through, which really was the final death knell for the canal here in the Westfield region. The Irish settled a lot on the Union Street north side. We always think of the north side as being the tough side of the river, but since I'm Irish, I'm not going to go any further and make any implications. But we were not always welcomed. The Irish were thought of as rabble-rousers, and that goes back to New England's history with the Protestant religion as opposed to the Catholic religion. There's even a story, and Cindy, you know this story, about burning down St. Mary's, that they were on the way to burn down St. Mary's, and I think it was Hiram Hull. Is it Hiram?
Yes, who stepped in?
Who stepped in and stopped the burning. So we did have our issues here in Westfield. Luckily, that's all behind us. We can now celebrate the parade. Is it this weekend?
March 23rd.
March 23rd. So in Holyoke also had a large population of Irish, I believe, at one time. If Google was correct, and Google must be correct. Don't you say anything, anybody.
Okay.
Apparently, 1/3 of the population at one time in Holyoke was all Irish, and they also came in to work in the mills and in the canals there. So that's it for my Irish. I'm not going to sing you an Irish song. Lucky for you. They pay me to... Oh, no, wait. I'm sorry. They pay me not to sing. I get those two things confused. Anyway, moving right along, I'm going to start introducing our guests. We have Dr. Nicholas Aida that we had here the last time, but we only got through half, Nick, of what we were supposed to do. He is with us from Westfield State University, where he is the head of the history department and the philosophy department. So welcome back, Nick. We thank you.
Hello, everybody.
For coming back. You were on vacation.
I was on vacation, yes.
And it was much better than being here, I assume.
Equally interesting.
Equally interesting. Well, that's good to know. And you're back here, back in the schedule, and back to rehearsal.
Yep. That's a whole other subject we don't have to touch on.
We will not touch on that today. We will get to that when I have Carol Palmer in. Oh, Carol Palmer. Anyway.
That's your other show.
That is the other show.
Yeah.
Goodness knows. I have enough going on. This
This is
getting
history,
like-
not culture.
It's getting like a second job. Yes, where history happens in Westfield. And to Nick's right, we have another new person. We have Sam McMunn. Sam, I warned him, Cindy. I said, once we know who you are,
You'll become a regular.
Nick knows that.
Yes. Yeah.
He just said once, well, I think I can. Okay. So, Cindy, would you introduce our friend Sam and see what we have to say today with Sam?
Yes, Sam comes to us. Well, I think you are a local Westfield person.
Yes.
Yes, but what our interest today is your involvement at Fort Ticonderoga.
Yeah.
So how did you get involved with Fort Ticonderoga?
So I started with kind of a huge interest with history. Ever since I started in school, it was always my number one subject, always was getting A's in that class, the whole 9 yards. And then I started really being like, you know what? It would be fun if I got involved in the actual history of it, if I got involved doing the reenactments, going to the places. And, you know, a lot of people say that the mecca for reenactors is Fort Ticonderoga. So I contacted them, got involved with them, and really started taking off with them.
That's excellent. Did you study history in college as well? And you
I did not go to college. I actually went straight to the railroad.
Oh,
I worked for the
okay.
railroad, Amtrak.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but then on the side, did your history.
Yep.
And excellent. So Fort Ticonderoga is not very near Westfield, is it?
No, it's about a 3-hour drive from up here, from here in Ticonderoga, New York. And
And how often do you go?
I go about once or twice per month, depending on how many events are going on up there.
Could you just do us a favor and stand up so we can see your outfit?
Yes,
Because you can't
I can do a stand here. Let me.
show us your pieces
Yes,
that you've
come
made.
out.
Now, we need to point out, because he's not on microphone, that Sam has made all of these himself. I am totally impressed, as I can sew buttons.
Yes, I can sew clothes, but nothing like this. So,
Nothing like
Sam, when you sit back down, tell us how you came about to make this.
So when it comes to reenacting and really being involved in it, making the clothes is always what's best. There are certain standards that have to be met when it comes to reenacting, and the best way to do that with your clothes, hand sew them. It's the way that they did it back then. So it's a lot of pieces with these clothes. So you have the outer coat, then you have your waistcoat. Under that, you have the breeches. I obviously can't see the breeches from here, but you have the breeches there. And then under that, you have your shirt under here, and then an ascot to tie it all off. But every single thing that I am wearing, besides my socks, which are machine made, every single thing I'm wearing
Including
is
your
handmade.
shoes.
Including the shoes are
Wow.
also handmade as well. But, you know, it's very important that you have this sense of being authentic. It's when you start veering off from that course, and you know, that it becomes kind of this, oh, well, people are going to look at this, and those people are going to go, oh, well, that's how they should look. And that's not how they should look.
No.
This is how they should look.
An interesting side that Sam shared with us is that in colonial days, they didn't necessarily have underwear.
No, your undershirt underneath all of this serves as your underwear, your sleeping garments, your everyday shirt wearing, and they were actually quite cleanly with their clothes. Not so cleanly with themselves, but very cleanly with their clothes. You would have had about 2 pairs of clothes in total, two outfits for each person.
Now, I think you also told us that when you started working at Fort Ticonderoga, you just started as a guide before you were a reenactor?
Yep, so you kind of start learning the history of it. You start going around Fort Ticonderoga, learning what to talk about, what they're portraying in the moment. And from there, you work your way up as you get pieces of your uniform to start doing either being a soldier, shoemaker, tailor, whatever the case may be, whatever you want to do. Personally, I do soldiers.
So that's your favorite? is
Yes,
doing soldiers.
absolutely. I love it. It's great.
And what do you do as a soldier?
So as a soldier, as of right now, we are portraying the 26th Regiment of Foot up in Fort Ticonderoga. They were the main regiment guard at Fort Ticonderoga from 1773 until 1775 when the fort was ultimately captured. It was a very small garrison of about 50 men under the command of William Delaplace, and they were known as the fort's guard. Ultimately, as a soldier, your daily duties are carrying out what is known as fatigue duty, which is stuff like washing clothes, tailoring, cutting firewood, a bunch of other duties like that. And then also your main duty is drill. You must drill with the muskets. You must drill with marching. You must get everything perfect. In fact, the way that they put it and the order that goes out from the king is that every man should be firing their musket until they are a good marksman in all directions, is the actual name of the drill that goes out.
Are you a good marksman?
I try to be. I'm learning. Actually, the past 3 events that we've done in January, February, and March, we have actually live fired at each of those events towards a barrel target, which is exactly what they would have done back in that day.
So you are portraying a British soldier.
Yes, I am portraying a British soldier.
And once Ticonderoga was captured, was it inhabited with the Patriots, or was it closed down?
Yes. So once it was captured, they did leave a small garrison there. The garrison did grow in numbers. However, the biggest problem with Fort Ticonderoga was the fact when the French abandoned it, ultimately, because originally, if you don't know, Fort Ticonderoga was Fort Carillon. It was blown up by the French. The French lit a fuse to the North Officers' Barracks, and underneath that was about a 20,000-pound gunpowder storage room. They lit a fuse to that, and the fort, throughout its entire rest of its existence, was always in some sort of disrepair. So it was very hard to keep any large-sized garrison there at the fort. You also had the problem that the fort wasn't in the best area. The fort happens to sit on a peninsula. However, you have 3 other mountains surrounding the fort that are much taller than where the fort lays. So not only did you have the problem of defending Fort Ticonderoga, you had the problem of defending the 3 mountains surrounding it. And though all 3 of those mountains, you had to have troops to be stationed at those mountains as well. So there were a lot of problems throughout Fort Ticonderoga's entire existence because unfortunately the French just did not pick a good spot.
So why has it continued? Why is it still here?
So the reason why Fort Ticonderoga is still here is you have a family known as the Pell family who bought the land back in the late 1800s. And I believe it's 1905, but don't quote me on that. In 1905, they started restoration on the fort. The Pell family was a very large family. They built a mansion, which rests in what was and is now what is known as the King's Garden. As part of Fort Ticonderoga, they did have a garden there where they grew their own fruit, vegetables. They had livestock there, and then just a little bit at the shore. Past the King's Garden, you also had the King's Shipyard because there was the Lake Champlain fleet that you had as well. So the Pell family buys the property. 1905, they start the restoration. I'm not sure of the exact date that it is put on a historic record, but restoration continues to this day. In fact, right now we are working on the east demi-lune of the fort. If you don't know what a demi-lune is, the fort is a
Nick probably does, but I don't.
the fort is a star shape, and off of the star you have smaller triangle-shaped emplacements, basically, and those are known as demi-lunes. And so right now we're currently working on one of the demi-lunes up there. So restoration does continue to this day at the fort.
Interesting. This is kind of a side note, but the star shape. I noticed St. Augustine is star shaped.
Yep.
There's a fort up in Maine that's star shaped. Was this a common structure?
It was very common. I don't know if you.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the reason is once you have more firearms, you're using the shape because you can cover each other's enfilading. Well, the term is enfilading, but you can cover each other's sides a little easier if you've got the star. You can project out a little bit, and then this side can cover this side. illustrating with my hands for no apparent reason. But not every, like in North America, not everybody utilized that. So St. Augustine, as you mentioned, they did, but in the Presidios that were built across from Florida all the way across the American Southwest and then up north along the coast in California, they used instead a system. It was more square, but each corner had a projection that came out a bit. It wasn't quite starred. It was more like half a pentagon, if you will. And that way they could do the same kind of thing from a military tactical perspective. But similar to what Sam was saying about Ticonderoga, the problem that the Spanish had with the Presidios is the garrisons. They only had about 30 people in each one of these, typically. And then they used, particularly in the American Southwest, they used what they call janissarios. Basically, it's a term for local native allies that they could convince to fight alongside them. But those 30 soldiers, that's not enough.
Exactly.
If, for example, the English had ever launched a sustained attack, on Spanish emplacements in the American Southwest or in the Pacific, they wouldn't have been able to protect themselves.
Talk to the people at the Alamo.
Well, so that's a different story. But
Whole nother program.
Story. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it speaks to the point of even if you go back to medieval period, you're shaping different kinds of readouts and structures to be able to cover more area without having to exit the fort. That was always the key. Like, I don't want to have to leave the building. And as Sam pointed out, once Ticonderoga, the French don't want to leave something that's useful, which is why they end up, blowing up the fort.
Gotcha.
Or attempting to blow up. They didn't get the whole thing, of course, but
They thought in lighting that fuse, because the walls of the fort was all basically a gigantic tunnel system within those walls, leading to different gunpowder storage rooms. They thought that it would kind of cause a chain reaction, and it didn't. There's also the story that I forget the guy's name, but when the British were launching the attack on the fort during the French and Indian War, the soldiers were offered 5 guineas for anyone who would go into the fort and stomp out the fuse, and no one wanted to do it. No one wanted to do it. So ultimately, the North Officers' Barracks and part of the North Wall do end up blowing sky high, and just constant state of disrepair. No one wanted to be there. The conditions were poor. The wind was high. And in fact, our January event we named For the Rigor of the Climate. And during the entire day, it was about 12 degrees out, and we were dealing with 40+ mile per hour winds because of the peninsula. And it was not fun. It was not fun at all.
Sam, are you open all year round to the public? When are you open?
So the fort right now is only open once per month. We are doing what we are calling our winter quarter events. And if you don't know what winter quarter is typically soldiers would go to one location and stay there for the winter. That there was not a lot of fighting during the winter. So as of right now, we are in winter quarters. And then starting next month, we will then be open on the weekends. And then throughout the summer, they're open every single day during the summer.
And I assume they get a lot of people in there.
Oh, absolutely. And
I've been there.
yeah, and our biggest draws are our events. Anytime we're doing our events, there's thousands of people. I think during when we did our Browns Raid event last year, I think we had a grand total of about 6,000 people come to that event, and that was a 3-day event. So between the 3 days, we had about 6,000 people every single day for that event.
Do you stay on the grounds when you're there?
We sleep in the barracks on our nice straw mattresses and straw pillows, and it's not very comfortable, but a big 18th century thing is drinking, so we manage. We manage.
For people who don't want to drive all the way to Fort Ticonderoga, are there local events that you take part in?
So I do a lot of stuff out in Lexington and Concord. In fact, the big event coming up will be the Battles of Lexington and Concord, and I believe that's April 19th.
Yep.
Yep,
Yes.
April 19th for that. I will not be participating in that this year. Unfortunately, I have something else booked
Oh.
at that same exact time, but that's a great event. But if you're ever looking for events, Lexington and Concord are the places.
Nope.
Well,
I'm not
maybe
that
not
crazy.
this year.
Yeah, maybe not this year because
Well,
no.
it's both good and bad, as you and I have talked about.
And with that, I want to, while we're on Lexington and Concord, I really need Nick to talk about the shot heard round the world, because people have no idea which one it is.
Well,
The one I thought it was.
okay.
Is
Tell me what
recent.
you thought.
Well, I always thought it was the first one in Lexington. But
That's what I thought. No,
No,
it's
it's
not.
Concord. It's at the bridge.
Interesting.
All right, Nick.
It's at the North Bridge, arguably. I mean, the thing with what happened in Lexington, as Sam's alluding to, it's a wonderful event to go to. When I was 10 and 11 years old, I was a fifer for a group in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and so we had obligations at various events and so on. I helped my mother make my stuff. I didn't make my own hat. I was going to ask you that. I assume you didn't make your own hat, or did you fashion it or sort of shape it yourself?
So you can buy the molds
Yeah,
for it.
okay.
Basically, they come in it's a flat brimmed hat, and
Right.
then you have to tie it up and sew it up with the.
Yeah, so that's what she and I did. We got a flat brim piece and kind of worked it, and then we worked in. We just spent time like thinking, well, what would a young kid want to stick in their hat? And so I found a bunch of different local bird feathers, but I also used pine cones or not pine cones. I'm sorry, a pine sprig for mine, and.
Which is very accurate. By the way.
Yeah, and then she. The only thing I was already wearing glasses then, so we didn't go that far. I didn't
didn't
grind
get-
my
you
own
didn't-
lenses.
you didn't get to the
no, and I
glasses point?
didn't get the thing. It was only 2 years before this that I discovered that I couldn't actually see. So that was kind of funny. But anyway,
You do need to see.
yeah, you do need to see. But so part of the fun there was doing these events,
Yeah.
as you experience. So you go to. You learn the music. I do kind of wish I wasn't the greatest fifist, so I kind of wish I'd chosen the drum instead. But I did learn enough about how to play certain songs pretty competently. And they liked that they had a group of us who were young, who were 10 to like 15 who were in the group. And then there were adults so we marched in a variety of events, different kinds of parades. We went to events at different locations. The one thing I didn't get to do is I got to muster on April 19th in 1981, I think it was, or 82. I think it was 81. But I didn't get to, because Sudbury didn't make it right away,
Right.
that's what I did. So this speaks
Right.
to what you've experienced too, I'm sure,
Right.
where well, no, we didn't actually make it. So all we did was get together in this space kind of in North Sudbury. And then we started as if we were on our way to Concord, which will get back to your question.
No,
But
that's fine.
so I just wanted to.
Yeah, so I've done the event in years past, and I think I'm kind of glad I'm not doing it this year because my group personally that I'm involved with is the 6th Middlesex Regiment, and we march a total of 18 miles that
Okay,
day.
now.
In wool
And-
clothes?
In the full getup, you are marching 18 miles
In those shoes?
in these shoes.
Now,
there
are you
was-
talking British uniform?
No,
No.
Real.
American
one.
militia for
Okay.
that.
American.
American militia for that. I do a wide variety of. Most people would label me as a turncoat, so I do a quite
Traitor.
yeah right. I do a quite large variety.
No,
of
we were
those.
all British, so it's fine.
That is correct.
I mean, you had the regulars,
Yes,
and then you
yes.
had the British. But yeah, so that's for the 6th Middlesex. That's an 18-mile march for that day.
Yeah.
So
would
it's
not
quite a lot. But you have, I think there was last year there was only a total of 3 of us who did the full 18 miles. So the 3 people who were doing it were the most dedicated. We love our history, but no, that event is a great event. The parade is spectacular. But like you said, I would not recommend going this year.
Do they bus people in this year? Like you park off-site?
No, they typically do. Not even. I mean, this year is obviously it's the 250th anniversary. So, but even in a regular year when they're doing these reenactments, they still draw in thousands of people.
Yeah.
And so they do have gathering spaces, and then you bring people in. So well, I think it could be exciting. I think it also. It depends on your comfort level with crowds and other
yeah,
things.
for sure.
For me personally, I'm good to watch it on a television or something.
I do believe they are going to be broadcasting it
Yeah.
this year. I do believe they are. I believe, and a few of the groups also have like those GoPro cameras. I feel. I think a
so
few
they're
of the I think a few of the groups are also going to be with the GoPro cameras live streaming on
Interesting.
YouTube or Facebook or something like that for like a point of view video.
Now that we did not have in 1981.
No.
And I
And
guess
we
they
did not have it in 1776
yeah,
either.
right.
No, we did
75.
not.
Or 1976.
We did not.
So we're on this event is the third big thing in Massachusetts to take place since 2023. So there are these little pieces. In February, Salem did their small one, where people don't always know this. I think we talked about this last time a little
did.
bit, but the March on Salem.
We did.
Leslie's retreat.
Yeah, I did what I was told to do.
Yes.
I walked
Yes.
across the bridge.
Yes.
Now I'm leaving. And it's such a funny kind of event. But what happens and the reason there's confusion, to go back to your original question here, is that at Lexington, the militia captain or commander, in this case Parker, had once he saw the group arrayed before him of the British regulars, they had done their due diligence from Parker's perspective, and okay, it is now time for the 70-ish of us, 75-ish or so, to disperse. Like we're out, we're walking away. And at some point, somebody fired, and it's unclear, and it remains unclear. If you read the documents, the documentation of the after-action report, from British regulars' perspective, from colonial reminiscences, all of that, it still is unclear other than the fact that you had, several hundred men armed and with tension. So
Nervous,
it can be accidental. It seems very likely, and I guess Sam and I can engage in a debate about this, but it seems likely that this first shot was a militia person because
I've even read that someone dropped his gun and it's discharged.
And only because from the regular perspective, there was a procedure that you had to
Yes.
engage with. So go ahead. Sorry. But
So having handled actual period weapons, not reproductions, having handled period weapons, so on modern firelocks, what you have on modern firelocks is you have the half cock position, which is the cock is what ultimately fires. It holds the piece of flint that strikes against the frizzen, which sends the spark into the pan. Whole drawn out process. That's a lot to explain.
Sketching
but
this.
yeah, right.
Sorry.
But the original flintlocks and much of what the militia were carrying were all hunting weapons, and they did not have this half cock
Right.
position. So it's one false move, you hit that trigger, and you're already in the full cock position, which many of them already were because you have a large force coming upon you. Yeah, you're going to want to have your musket loaded. Yeah, you're going to want to be ready. So a lot of them were already primed and ready to go, and they're already in that full cock position, ready to fire if they need to fire. One false move of your finger, one big bang on the ground, that trigger's going and it's firing. So
And-
it's quite possible.
Yeah, and given that it was
Interesting.
so back to your question, right? That's why we look at Lexington as almost an accidental sort of conflict in some respects. It was very purposeful from the regulars' perspective, right? They're coming out of the city of Boston. There's just as a reminder for folks, Boston looked very different. So the whole area that we refer to as the Fens or the Back Bay was literally the bay. I mean, it was
Underwater.
it was underwater. And so from the regulars' perspective, they could either go south down through the Roxbury Gate near Dorchester, or they could go across the Charles River into Cambridge. And essentially, this is what they chose to do, right? So they go across, they march literally on Mass Ave, or what we would call Route 2 at this point, and then head west. So by the time they arrive, they're a little tired and so on, but they're not. But they're still regulars. So they're still. You mentioned, of course, the drill,
Yes.
and part of drill is not just practicing and going through all the motions of loading the weapon, but how do you reposition yourself with a loaded firearm into a position to be prepared to fire. You have to listen to orders. I mean, this is the main thing. And so the British regulars were extremely disciplined in this sense. And so there isn't likely that somebody's randomly, particularly at this array of, 70, 75 militia in front of them. They're just not going to randomly fire into the crowd. The reason that so Concord, on the other hand, by the time the British regulars disperse the militia, there are a number of individuals who are killed outright, several who are mortally wounded, and other casualties as well. And then they reorganize under orders. They do what they had come to do, which is, can we find Adams? Can we find Hancock? Can we find the powder and so on? And they move on, and because they know that the provincial Congress, that's not the right word, sorry, the provincial general court for Massachusetts had been meeting in Concord. And that we did get to in our last conversation. They were given permission to meet by General Gage, who by that time was the military governor of Massachusetts, and then Gage immediately kind of regretted his decision. Wait, why did I let you all meet? I shouldn't probably have done this.
Right.
And so, but they had already determined in the fall of 1774 that they would be meeting in not in Cambridge where they originally met, but rather in Concord. So that's part of why they're heading out there. So that the whole shot heard around the world thing, first of all, it's a 19th century concept, right? It's not even in the reminiscences or statements or after action
Interesting.
reports.
Yeah.
It's from a poem, and so that's why it's connected to Concord, not Lexington. That's partially why, because of the author of the poem.
Oh,
but
that's right, the bridge.
right,
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And who made the first shot at Concord?
well. This is less clear
Yeah,
as
also
well,
debated.
because what happens here is, so if you've been to the North Bridge, it's been rebuilt and destroyed over the years. That river has flooded many times and taken it out, so they've had to replace it. But it is a pretty narrow space. There isn't really an easy way to get into the space they were trying to get to without getting across this bridge. The local militia knew, and by the time they've moved, meaning the regulars have moved from Lexington to Concord, you've got not only the Concord militia out, but now you've got people from Stowe, you've got people from Acton, you've got people from North Sudbury who are beginning to get there. And then these other communities throughout Middlesex County, which
Just
is
a gigantic, large force of
Right.
militia at this point is all gathered in Concord.
And so even though that number may be, it's definitely, so Lexington 75-ish, right? Concord, you're looking at least 400. And then you have to try to get across this bridge. So the militia, although some had military experience, were not necessarily firing in disciplined fashion. So it seems likely, again, similar to Lexington, that one of the first to fire is going to be the the colonial militia in this case, because they're not organized in the same fashion. Yes, they've got individual commanders and so on, but they are not firing in line, if you will. And I'm sure part of what you do in the drill is you go through the whole, not only firing in
Yes.
line, but how do I wheel? And when I wheel, how do I turn? And which part of the line is turning and which
Yeah,
part isn't.
exactly. So actually, in March of 1775, you have the Massachusetts Provincial Court. You have them ordering that all of the militia forces also use the 1764 Manual of Arms,
Right.
which is also what the British are using. However, 3 months to practice this drill, which takes years to perfect, is not enough time. So
Right.
you still have the U.S. hasn't gotten to a point yet then where they have said, okay, we are going to use this manual. You have a lot of militia forces who are also like, well, we want to do this, so we're going to do this. Then
Right.
you have another militia force that's like, oh, okay, we're going to use the 1764. Then you have another militia force that's like, oh, let's use the French manual.
Right.
You have so many different militia forces being like, well, we're going to do what we want to do. So there's just absolute disorganization in terms of what they want to do when they reach Lexington.
I can
and
see
Concord.
that. Peter, you want to take us to a brief break, and we'll pick this up on the other side and get to what else today is about.
Yes.
Mrs. Casey, Stony Point, Janissaries March.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
And we are back again. This is Kathy Palmer coming to you with Cindy Gaylord as the co-host here on History Happens in Westfield. And we are talking today with Dr. Nick Ieda from Westfield State University and Sam McMahon, who is doing mostly reenactments up at Ticonderoga, but you do it in many other places. If you were listening in, you heard us not me, you heard them talking in detail about Concord and Lexington. And we're going to move along now to what else today is, Dr.
Well,
Ieda.
I'll get there. I want to. I'm
You're
going to
gonna
put.
get there. We're
I'm going to
getting
put Peter
across
on
the
the
bridge.
spot for a second, but
Okay.
it just. I know that earlier you projected an image of Ticonderoga. If you can look up an engraving by Amos Doolittle, Amos Doolittle's engravings of Lexington and Concord, just show one of them. It doesn't matter which one, really.
Oh, that's okay.
That would be kind of a good illustration for people, and it addresses a question that Cindy was asking in the break. And so we will get to what today is the celebration of for Boston in a moment. But it one of the things that I think is going to be exciting about the reenactment this year is people who don't have a sense of the just the way in which the events transpired or what have you, or were too young to remember 1976, or, like this will be a chance, for them to be able to experience this kind of commemoration in a completely different way. And there are, I'm sure, folks in Massachusetts who are really following these events in the sense of like they went to the Boston Tea Party thing in December of 2023, and they're, maybe they were really excited and went to a general court meeting in fall of 2024. I don't know that they did, but you never know. Somebody might have been that into it. And I think we tend to have this vision of, we were able to defeat these individuals. So Peter's been excellent. Thank you so much. And what he's got is Amos Doolittle's image here of the incident at Lexington. Now, Amos wasn't himself a witness to the event. However, he was a militiaman and in Connecticut, and he was under the command, actually, of Benedict Arnold and others. And the interesting thing here is when he arrived at Boston, this will lead us back to your question, Kathy, don't worry.
I'm not worried.
When he arrived in Boston in late April, this would have been about April 29th or 30th, 1775, he was one of many of the thousands of New Englanders who responded to the call to keep the British regulars bottled up in the city. And as I mentioned before, with the city only having three if you count the ocean itself, but really only two practical ways in and out, having this many militia surround the city meant that the British were in a very difficult spot. Sam, you mentioned how Ticonderoga itself was not particularly advantageous to defend. Well, Boston wasn't that advantageous to defend either for a variety of reasons. Amos came up as part of his group. He was an engraver and silversmith. He is sometimes referred to as the Paul Revere of Connecticut. And one of the things he wanted to do was to go talk to people and ask them questions. What happened? And then he created these. And by December of 1775, he had a series of 4 plates that he had engraved and was selling, essentially showing Lexington, Concord, or 2 images of Concord, one at the bridge itself, and then one kind of as the British are moving through downtown Concord. And then the 4th image was the march back to Boston. And that march back was where we kind of get our misconception that the British were defeated largely by, colonial militia using these tactics of sort of sniping and hiding behind
guerrilla
things
warfare,
and so forth and so on. Yeah. And so that term's a 19th century term, right? And it's used by the French to refer to Spanish partisans and others. But this image here, another Doolittle engraving, captures quite nicely some of the reactions after Concord. So the British regulars suffer quite a few losses here. There's about 120, 125 or so killed in this outright. And then there are about 20 to 30, I think it's 26, 27 reported missing, which can mean anything. It can mean somebody's like, I'm done, I'm walking out of here. We didn't talk about this, but some of the British regulars were not necessarily really volunteers, I guess we'll say, right? I mean, Sam. And so some of them were serving out, in a sense, instead of going to prison, they were serving out a military career.
So they also didn't want to be there.
Yes.
Right.
And you can go back into the movement of various regiments into Boston, starting back in 1770 and through 1774, 75, and see what kinds of folks were not thrilled, to be stationed in this space. They had, in some cases, if you go back as far as 1770, they'd come from a station in Ireland, then they'd been moved to Halifax, and then ultimately to Boston. But at any rate, one of the things that Doolittle did is he talked to witnesses, and in addition to walking the grounds, and that was a big thing that he wanted to do. So in this image, this is him recreating from talking to witnesses what it looked like when Pitcairn and others were sort of looking, okay, where are we going to go? And what we've got down in the foreground there is Pitcairn and Colonel, I've just forgotten his name, so I apologize. But the colonel who was in charge of this particular unit, looking out across at the position where they have to go. So this is pre-bridge. They're in Concord, but they have to get to the bridge. And so when they marched out, which was the previous image that Peter put up, they are being sniped at for sure, and that's part of why they suffer so mightily. However, it's June of 1775 that gets us moving towards a recognition that, wait a minute, some of those colonial militia that Sam was referring to are reading those manuals kind of carefully, actually. So John Starks, for example, is one of the commanding officers who takes the information from the manuals and adapts it to a situation. So as the colonial forces are defending the hills opposite Boston in what is Charlestown, they are aligning themselves in ways that utilize both the training from the manuals and practical techniques for the situation in which they're in. And this is what made Stark so successful, actually, and commented on in after-action reports that were written by the British, who are saying, okay, hold on a second. Like, we actually lost a ton of people going up this hill, and we win the battle, meaning the British regulars win the battle, but it doesn't really help morale, because you're still trapped in the city, and at least you got some of the hills dealt with. But Sam alluded to this, obviously, in his work at Ticonderoga. Once the colonial forces capture that fort in late 1775, it is determined that they are going to move those cannon to Boston and position them on the hills that are south of the city, because they've lost Charlestown, and so on. But anyway, the after-action reports from the British were are really rife with praise for the colonial militia and an acknowledgement that this isn't going to be very easy. Going back to Concord for a sec, Peter's got the image of the bridge fight up. And again, Doolittle is talking to people. So, Cindy, you had asked about this, but on the right-hand side are your British regulars, and on the left-hand side, the colonial militia. And Doolittle, and I'll defer to Sam here to talk about this because you fired the weapons. Doolittle took great care to, emphasize the smoke. Because one of the things that the regulars were quite good at, and this is why they were so praising Starks at Charlestown, is they were very good at just keep firing. Like, it doesn't matter if you can't see, you just keep firing into the space. And typically, because they're not rifled firearms, the other admonishment was fire lower. Right, aim a little bit lower, because the bullet or ball, more accurately, tended to rise a bit, and so gun smoke is getting in the way. The British are trained well enough to fire quite quickly, but they're just firing at an area and not worried about, do I see something? Maybe the first time, great. And Starks took advantage of this. This is one of the reasons he was so praised, is because he was able to cover the retreat that the Americans had to make, the British Americans had to make as they moved off the hill. And they only abandoned the hill because they ran out of ammunition, basically. So they could have withstood several more assaults from the British regulars at this point. But the other thing that particular battle reveals is the level of training again that was different. And, you know, the fact that the British soldiers would continue to march up the hill to then get in line, to then fire, because you can't fire from the bottom of the hill because you're not going to hit anything.
Right.
You know, and you just had to, and so all of that, that's why we hear the music. That's why, you know, the sergeants, their job essentially was to close lines, get people up, and get them moving. And so what ends up happening at the end of this conflict is, yes, again, the British win the hill, but it's simply a matter of time. The American forces withdraw to Cambridge, but they've also got the outside or southern edge covered and to the west, and so there is nowhere for them to go. And it's a strategic kind of stalemate for a while. You also have a smallpox epidemic emerging, you know, in the town, and then you have this sort of conflict, right? Because Boston actually had a surprising number of loyalists, surprising, I should say, to 21st century Americans, not to people who actually know something about the history, but
Right.
and so those loyalists are now getting a little nervous. Well, okay, what happens when or if the city falls? The city falls ultimately today in 1776. So we're 249 years away from the celebration of that incident. And for Boston, I think it's just an interesting kind of coincidence of history, I guess, that March 17th happens to be evacuation day, and then the city gets this vast Irish population in the 19th century, so it becomes...
And that's what we celebrate.
And in the 20th century, you end up with
Takes
two
it.
things going on,
Yeah.
where we're
Yeah.
celebrating the
Yep.
evacuation day, which was a state holiday. Well, no, I'm sorry, it was a city holiday, more accurately, until, 2008, I think.
It was a state holiday after that because my aunt used to have that off at UMass.
Oh, they did. Okay.
And it was always
Yeah.
said that there was Irish-controlled a congressional legislature passed it so they found something in history that would coincide with St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
That was the running joke.
Yeah. So
you
they reorganized, I guess I'll say, the state holidays. So like when I first started working at Westfield State, Bunker Hill Day was still a day off. You know, now it didn't. I didn't have students except for my summer class, but that meant I didn't teach on that day because
What date was that? June?
June 25th, right? I think, Sam, somewhere around there.
22nd.
22nd.
I believe
okay, yeah.
it's
So
the
it's
22nd.
somewhere in that range, but and so that was a state holiday, and you know it's just one of the many vagaries of Massachusetts, both politics and history, that you know we make these days. April 19th, of course, you know, has become third Monday, you know, in April, but some of the towns around like insisted, no, it's April 19th. That's
Yeah.
it. Like we're not doing it unless it's April 19th. So Sudbury, Lexington, Concord, they used to do that. Like when I was a kid, that was what they did.
That's going to be another event this year that people are. If you're not going to do Concord and Lexington, which we've all already kind of
Yeah.
established, don't go to it. This year, at least, watch it from home. Go to the Bunker Hill
Yeah.
reenactment.
Yeah.
This is the first. I believe this is the first time since the 200th that we are doing a Bunker
And
Hill
that'd be the
reenactment.
25th, June?
I believe
Well,
it's going to be
Whatever the
some
Saturday.
It's going to be sometime in June. I forget the
Yeah.
exact date
Okay.
of it. I do
All right.
have the date available on my phone, but I'm not going to pull that out right now. So that's going to be in June. So that's going to be another big event going on. And this is the first time in 50 years that they have actually done a Bunker Hill reenactment. It is not going to be at Bunker Hill because
Yeah.
that is
It's
a
not
historic.
Bunker Hill.
Reedsville?
Well-
What I'm trying to say is it's not going to be at the actual Bunker Hill Memorial Site
Right.
because that is a memorial site and
Right.
also run by the National Park. But they are going to be doing that reenactment this year.
It's also
you did-
tricky to do because
Yes.
for those of you unfamiliar with Charlestown, there's a lot of streets now.
A lot of streets, a lot
as
of
opposed
houses.
to it was a fairly undeveloped and bucolic space, at least where the conflict took place, and people had not built on the hill at that point. Not too many homes. However, there are other historic locations there, and it would be an interesting space to go to. Go ahead, Sam.
So you had hinted on the muskets. You were going to
Right.
ask about the musket
Yeah.
smoke. So musket gunpowder then is very different from what we're using nowadays. So when you see the pictures or the paintings, the engravings of the musket fire from back then, they are very accurate. That smoke was thick. That smoke was black. But nowadays, our muskets, once they fire, the smoke kind of just poof goes away and rises up and away. So for all of you listening at home, one of the things that people are always kind of say is, oh, the muskets are inaccurate. They're inaccurate. They're inaccurate. Wrong. Completely 100% wrong. It's the person behind the musket that makes it inaccurate. So if you were a good marksman, you could hit your shot. In fact, there was a study done, I believe, in 1780 or 1790 by a leading general out in England who did a study, and he put 10 men together, and he included a wide variety of people who did this study, so people who have never fired a musket before versus a person from the Grenadiers Company. And if you don't know, the Grenadiers are the elite of the British companies. They had to be 6 feet tall. They had to be able to march 20 miles with a full pack. They had to be an excellent marksman. So they put this group together, about 10 individuals, and they start firing the muskets. They do, 100 yards, 80 yards, 50 yards. And they find that the grenadier, no matter where the barrel is, can shoot it every single time. They even test up, I believe the furthest that they tested to see if the grenadier could do it was 300 meters. Now, whether that's a fluke shot, just pure luck, or whether or not it's actually the person behind the musket is
people
heavily
confuse,
debated. Sorry.
That's all right. I think people confuse the range, the effective range of the weapon, with the accuracy.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you definitely have to be quite close up in a close range, but this is also why they organized into lines.
Right.
When you had these lines, you had, it was very much of art of war back then. It wasn't like today's wars where it's like, okay, we're all just shooting at each other whenever we want. Back then it was, okay, one group, you guys are going to take a turn firing. Now the other group's going to fire. Oh, you guys fired. Now it's our turn to fire again. And this is very much how it was in a lot of situations. You start kind of getting away from that during the very beginnings of Lexington and Concord, but this is very much how it is during the French and Indian War leading up into the Revolutionary War, is this kind of, okay, we got to keep to this art of war kind of lines, do the whole 9 yards kind of thing.
May I ask you about the Grenadiers? So in the famous poem about Paul Revere's Ride, they talk about the Grenadiers are the ones that are in Boston getting ready. Is it going to be by land or by sea? So were they truly Grenadiers, or were they just regulars?
So you're kind of hinting on the poem there.
Exactly.
You're hinting on the poem there. So it was a mixture. We do know that there were a few grenadier companies that were stationed within Boston during this time. You also have a large portion of the grenadier companies also stationed up in Ticonderoga at this time as well. So they're kind of all over the place. I'm not sure of the exact numbers of grenadiers.
I have to look at the breakdown of the units that went out on that particular day. But it would not surprise me that there wouldn't be if there were a contingent of them, but they would not all be grenadiers.
Okay.
Right. So
as the poem suggests.
Right. Yeah. So the thing too is the grenadiers were mixed into companies. Right. So you did have just grenadier companies, but during this time in 1775, we don't really have full grenadier companies yet. You have mixtures of grenadiers into these companies of just regular soldiers.
Because that changes things. If you think that they sent out their most elite marksmen to go to Lexington and Concord, that changes at least how I perceive this whole, let's just go out and see what we can find their gunfight versus let's send our elite shooters.
Right. Well, they were definitely intending to, to stamp things out. I mean, this was not the Salem event. This was not, well, we'll send this small unit out and we'll hope that they, do what we asked them to do. This was, we want to capture these political
They thought it would end it.
leaders.
They
Right.
thought it would be over. They
Yeah.
thought they would send their troops out and that would be it and everything would be
done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the end, but we have come to the end.
Almost,
again.
right?
I know.
We have a minute or two.
Well, we started a minute or two early.
Oh.
So we're pushing up.
So Nick, part 3.
Part 3. I know we have
We'll get
not. I'm sorry, folks. We haven't even gotten to Westfield's involvement, which I promised to get to, Cindy.
Well, we can say this.
Okay.
They were not at Lexington and Concord.
Correct.
The Westfield
they were
the
not.
Westfield residents.
They didn't even know about it yet.
No, the Westfield residents did hear about it and gathered together. And estimates vary here, but either 40 or 50 people. But we know that the militia in town, not everybody had a firearm, according to one record.
Correct.
So
and then
the
they all of a
question
sudden got
is-
them and nobody
Pitchforks.
knows where they came from. So
Yep.
they said they all left with them, but no one knows where
Right.
they did. So I want to thank Dr. Aida. I want to thank you also, and of course Cindy on the other end of the table. We need to thank Peter for coming in and putting up with us all this time when he didn't have to be here. So we really do appreciate it, Peter. And come and watch this. Peter, when is this going to be broadcast? Is it tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I
Correct.
believe.
Yep.
So tune in at 8 o'clock. You can watch us. I will leave you with the Irish blessing, not the Evacuation Day blessing. I don't know of one. I'm sorry. If you have one, let me know. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and the rains fall soft upon your field. And may you get safely out of Boston when you need to.
May your
There you go.
cannons always fire.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, here it is. My time has come. Won't be long. I'll be moving on. I can't complain. I've had my day. Now I'll be on my way. And all the good times that we've had. Much more good than bad. What more can I say? Now I'll be on my way. Don't be sad now when I'm gone. Take your time while you're still young. In the warm sunshine, make hay. Now I'll be on my way. And where I'm going, I don't know. But I'm heading off in some rain, hail, or snow. In the hour, I hear children play. Now I'll be on my way. I have no fear of what's to come.